Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to xLights Gems presentation on an introduction to xLights getting started. This session will be recorded, can be found with previous xLights presentations on the Gems YouTube channel, which there is a link posted in chat. Please keep your microphone muted, video off for the duration of the presentation. And with that, I will now turn it over to Daryl to continue the presentation. All yours, Daryl.
All right, so this session is really the basics to xLights. Um, there's a lot of things we won't be covering in this class, but this is going to be introduction for those first timers here. So we're going to go through right from the get-go here, software installation. So I'm going to try and piece things together here on the fly. So to get the software, there's obviously Windows version, there's a Linux version, and there is a Mac version. For the Mac version, I'm going to have to defer to the other experts. I believe you just go to the Mac store to get it. Um, but for all the Windows folks, you normally come to the xlights.org webpage. You can get to the downloads page right here. You would download the latest version off of here. As we're doing this, there's lots of other issues if you're not a new person that we might need to talk to you about to solve problems. Specifically, you may need to get this redistributable on the other thing, but I'm not going to go into all those issues. So when you click the download, it's going to get the latest version, 2025-02. Click Save. If you have Windows 11, you might get a bunch of stuff yelling at you about permissions. Hopefully you can figure it out. Usually there's a couple of drop downs there that says keep. Do you really want Microsoft to store it? Yes, yes, yes. Just click through as much as you need to. For example, here, it's going to say it's protected. Say more, say run anyway. This is going to install the software on your PC. It should prompt me. I haven't done this in a while, so let's see if it comes up, hopefully. We assume it's coming up. I don't know if I did anything wrong. This is where I twiddle my thumbs and wonder what happened. I didn't see anything. Let's try again. Yes. Oh, okay, there we go. So it's going to ask you where to install it. Normally it goes into your C drive. I think it's program files. Of course, I've been moving mine around, but just take the default, whatever the default is, something like this. Just take the default, let it create a shortcut for you, install, let it install. If it tells you need to reboot, you might have to do that. Hopefully it doesn't for me because I've had it installed before. There we go. The two options here, README and launch the application. We won't bother going through the README. It won't mean much to most new folks anyway, so we'll just uncheck that, start it up. All right. From there, we'll start up the version. It's going to tell me it's 2025-02, and there was a small patch, so it's 0.1 as well. And here's our interface. So that's it to installing it. It's very simple. And if I think I can show it to you. On the desktop, um, it's going to create three icons. The the show folder, I don't know if I can get to it while I'm presenting. Um, it'll show Xscanner, which is a network software, and xLights, and the Xscheduler show player. But we'll cover those quickly later on. So I just want to go through that. And from here, you're going to be prompted. Maybe I should have cleaned it out so it didn't show you, but it's going to prompt you for a show folder. I just want to talk a minute about a show folder. xLights puts all of its working files into what's called a show folder. And I'm just going to make it a new one here. So um, you would normally would place it in a directory, not right on your desktop or in any USB drive or anything like that. You normally would create it in its own little folder. We see a lot of people just put it under documents. So if I'm in documents, I would say new folder. and you would say, I want it to be a show folder. Now, there's lots of things you can go into naming a show folder. This is a little more advanced things about how you might name it properly. I suggest you don't name it with a date in it. Just call it show folder. So that way, as you go from year to year, xLights will work properly. So let's start with a new show folder. And this is what you're normally going to be presented with. And there's 3 tabs in xLights. There's the controllers tab, which you're looking at here, where you put in all the controllers that you're connected to. There's the layout tab where you design what you're going to be putting into your show. And then there's a sequence where you actually build a sequence to play on your show. All right. So let's just minimize this for a second. So that's a bit about the show folder. And be sure it's on physical drive. Ideally not on a network drive or a slow device, but something local to your hardware. And then we'll move on to the next topic here. Terminology. I just want to go through a few things as we're covering things off. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few items here, just again, for the intro for folks. We talk about a sequence. What's a sequence? I'm going to flip back and forth here. We talked about a sequencer. A sequence is a series of effects that make up a sequence. A sequence is going to play all these effects that will appear on all of your models or your props. So that's essentially what a sequence is. A controller. A controller is just what is used to output to the lights. Output, it's the device that you're going to send data to that controls the lights. A model, I'm just going to flip back and forth. A model is all of these elements here at the top. A model can be a star, a tree, a window frame, a matrix. Those are different models, so different props that represent groups of pixels that are going to be on your show. All right. A channel. I'm just scatterbraining here of various terms that we come across here. A channel is one piece of a pixel or one piece of a light where you have a red channel, a green channel, a blue channel, perhaps you have a white channel, a UV channel. A channel is a single channel, or you might say it's a 3-channel or a 4-channel pixel. It's basically a unit for your light. A pixel. A pixel is a physical light bulb that we call in the xLights terminology. Quite often it's the WS2811 is a protocol. A pixel is basically what we call a light. Another term is a node. I think it's a version of a pixel, but we use the terms interchangeably. Effects. I did already sort of cover that a little bit, but these are the effects up here at the top, and we can go through that when we cover the sequencer in a later version of the xLights gems. But these are all the effects. These are all the different things that you can make happen in your sequence. Render. Render, when we talk about rendering, is about converting these effects into the data that needs to go out to your controller. So you would render it, and it would go through all of the effects and determine what data needs to be sent to the controller. So some of these terms will become more evident when you actually get into sequencing and such, but I just wanted to cover some of these items off the top. Media. When you're going into xLights and you're creating a sequence, it asks for a media. So media is going to be your audio source. So if you've got an MP3 or you can also use video. So it could be an MP4 or an AVI file, any kind of source that's going to basically put the audio track into your show. A sequence doesn't have to have audio, but it's quite common to have audio in your sequence. And some more, a couple of file types. So there's an XSQ file. So again, when we're talking about effects going into a show and we put all our effects in here in your sequence, it's saved in an XSQ file. And that's basically how you would store all of your effects to make up a sequence. An FSEQ file is the result of doing that render that I just spoke about. So if you had an effects in here and you did a render and you saved it, it would create an FSEQ file. So that is the result of all the effects and the channel data that needs to go to the controller. So one of the things we like to say here in the Zoom room is if you have an FSEQ file, it's like a baked cake, and you can't get the individual ingredients back, but you have a baked cake in the results. So an FSEQ doesn't have the individual effects anymore. It has just the results of those effects. A new file here type is an XSQZ file. That's just a way of packaging up a sequence so that you can easily transport it over to another computer or to another user, or in the case of a vendor, that's how they package it up and send it to you as a purchased sequence. It basically bundles all of the necessary pieces together so that you can transfer it from one machine to another. Talk a little bit about a show player. And if you're in the Zoom before that, we were talking about a show player. Show player, like xLights does not itself play a sequence other than one time and one time only, or repeating it over and over again. You need a show player, which is usually a separate piece of software. Now, there is a product called the X Scheduler, which I mentioned at the beginning, that comes when you install xLights. That's a show player that can run on your Windows device. There's also a show player called FPP, which is a separate piece of software available from the FPP website. And that is a show player that will take those FSEQ files and send them out to the controller. So just to reiterate that xLights itself is not a show player. You can't schedule xLights to say run these 5 sequences at 8 o'clock till 10 p.m. That's done in a show player. And a show player is either a different piece of software, or in the case of FPP, it's quite likely a different piece of hardware. So just keep that in mind. Scheduling, that goes hand in hand with the show player. Scheduling is done in the show player. It's not done as part of xLights. Similarly, playlists. Playlists are how you bundle up a bunch of different sequences that we talked about. So a sequence is saved, and then you can create a series of sequences in a playlist. Then you can use the scheduling of the show player to actually play your show, or to play your sequences that you've built. So, and if there's other terms that we need explained, we can probably go through those too at the end as well. So now let's go a little bit through the UI of xLights. So as I showed you here initially, you've got the display. These are each one of these is a panel that can be moved, and you can place them in different orders. There's also across the top is the different panels that will open up the different panels that you're using. So if we're in the layout, we have what's so go to the sequencer. Go to the sequencer, you have the model previews. That's going to show you what is displaying on the model. And I think I'll just to show this real quickly, I'm going to say done, and I'm just going to quickly, oh, I got to create a model. I didn't want to have to do all this, but I just want to create something to show what we're doing. So we have a sequence. I'm going to create a new sequence. Discard and animation done. Because it makes a little more sense when I'm doing that here. So we have the model preview. So if I have an effect on my matrix, we're going to get a representation of it in the model preview, and you're going to get a representation of it in the house preview, which is accumulation of all the various models that you have in your display. So you have the model preview, you have the house preview. Up here, we have the color UI, so you can choose which colors will take place in this effect. Remember, I was talking about effects. This is one effect. In this case, it's a color wash effect. These are all in alphabetical order, other than, of course, the first 2 on and off, but color wash is there. And this is the color effect. You can say which colors you want to take place in that effect. You have the effect settings windows. So as you go through the different effects up here, you have different options that can be set on the effects. I don't want to cover too much on sequencing, so I don't want to go into what these effects do. Layer blending, probably a little more than you need to know for an intro class, but it's how does this effect affect the ones below it or above it? So it's layering, like layering on a cake. And we also have, oh, sorry, I got that backwards. Layer settings is like layering on a cake. And then you have layer blending, where you want to, how you want it to transform between at the start and end of an effect. and you have different options of how you want it to impact with other effects. So those are the main windows, but there is other issues, or there's other panels and such you can get to. But these are quick buttons to get to these windows. So effect settings is there, model preview, house preview, for example. I'm just clicking on and off. There is just how to a shortcut to get to the effect windows. Probably not necessary because they're already up there. A little bit about the toolbar as well. This is a default display for everybody. There is toolbars here, and there's 3 other toolbars up here. I don't see too many people moving these around, but they are movable. Especially if you got a large screen, you might want to say move this model preview over to your other screen on another window, or you may have the house preview over on another screen. There's different options you can do there. All right. What else we have? Effect icons. That's what I showed you here. So there should be tooltips on each one of these effect icons, so you can go across and you see all the different effects that are available to you. And you could also do more stuff than even just these effects. You could get right down, and if you're an old school AC, you can actually control individual pixels. We don't see that too often anymore, but these are generally the effects that you can choose from. And it's just a matter of clicking and dragging it down, right? And clicking and dragging it down. Again, I don't want to go too much into the sequencer because I'll leave that for another class. Um, what else we got? That's what I have here. So and I want to go back to this first tab. This is the controllers talked about when I first opened up xLights. Here's where you'd list out all of the different controllers that you have access to. So those could be your Culp controllers, your Falcon, your Dragons, your Experience Lights, etc. You do not need to have a controller here to use xLights. So you don't have to spend money to play in xLights. You can just get your xLights going and worry about the controller portions of it later as you build your display, as you play around with your design of your display and such. All right. And we go to the sequencer. We did that. I want to go to the layout. Here's the layout. And I think I wanted to go, just want to make sure I'm covering off things here. Yeah. Okay. So in your layout, again, for an intro here, I'm going to remove this just so that we can start with a clean slate. If you're just coming into xLights, you're going to be facing with this as your layout. What we would suggest is you would go and get an image that you would put on your display. And I think I've got some here if I can find it. One second. And I want to go down. I'm pretty sure I got one somewhere. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to click this guy. And open this image. So there is a picture for your background for your show. And I just grabbed that off the internet. And then I'd say, wait a second, this is not a good choice for a picture. Why is it not a good choice? It's not square to your house. It's going to be very tricky to use xLights in this scenario. So ideally, you have something that's straight on the house. And uh, if you're just starting off, ideally, it's just the front side. You're not doing a side display as well. So this probably is not a good picture for your house. So let's go back and try this one. This is more of an ideal setup for a house. It's a small, tight space, but at least it's something you can work with. So from this, once you have your house design on here, you can start designing. There's no money involved to start designing. You can just, you can dream big. What do you want to put on your house? I want to put some arches. You can just click and drag and put your house together. All right. Sure. All right. I don't want to get too much into this because that's more in the layout, but this is the idea of setting up your display. You want to get an image. So what makes a good image is something that's straight on, ideally, and as far back as you can that makes sense to you for your perspective display. And you might ask, well, where do I get the picture? If you're just playing around with xLights, go to Google Maps. You can even take a screenshot from Google Maps and put that in there, or Street View, I guess, technically speaking, it'd be Street View. I think I can go to Google Maps You guys have all done this a million times, and you can tell where I live. So let's go zoom in here. We'll just pick somebody's house. Careful what I wish for, right? And we'll see if we can find somebody here. Hopefully, I'm just guessing. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So find a house on your Google Maps. I'm just doing a little tool here, a little snippet tool. So I've got the picture here. You can edit it in a Photoshop tool if you need to, but save it. And then you can come back to here and you go to your layout again. You got to click on the empty space, click on this, click on this. And I went to my desktop. Was it? Here we go. Open. And there you got a house. So you can go without even leaving your computer, grab an image from your house, and you can start designing and playing around with um, xLights and dropping stuff on there. Really quite straightforward. Like I said, there's no harm in using props that you might not have. You can put them on and play with it, see what you might think of purchasing for later in the year or whatever. What does it look like to have a mega tree on your house, for example? Do you want a star? Just drag and drop. And you can just start playing around with their layout and look at creating different aspects. Just get familiar with the software just by clicking through the various models and figure out what each one does. And then there's some icicles. Don't worry about, how many nodes or how many pixels there are as you're building your layout. Just go and play with the software. There's all the properties. I don't think I talked about that, but one of the gotchas here in xLights is you got to be sure and hit the tab and the enter key to accept those changes that you make. There's a lot that goes into each of these properties, but you can just take the defaults initially and get playing with the software and see what works for you. I mean, you might do this one night, throw it all away, and try a different thing the next night. That's fine. No harm in doing that. What else we got to show here
Uh,
on this? Yeah.
Daryl, if you don't mind quickly, so I'm noticing that some of these models are kind of hard to see. So is there a way that we can make them more visible?
Well, one of the things you might do is go into the background image and change the brightness. That would bring it down for you, 20. Because it's more about the lights than it is the house that's being displayed. So you might have that your house brightness not nearly as bright as you would capture obviously in the street view. That's one way. Don't want to get too much into it, but you can actually change the appearance of the actual pixels. So the pixels, now this is just a visual in the UI. You can make them appear bigger, but you'd have to go through each one if you wanted to, just to make it a little bigger. It's going to vary based on your hardware, what resolution your monitor has, if you need to do something like that or not. So just play around with those two things. And I would just want to point out too that there's lots of, when we talked about the UI of xLights, there's lots of hidden treasures on a right-click menu option. So just be aware of that, especially as you're getting used to the software. You're like, how do you do something? Sometimes it's just hiding in a right-click menu. So just be aware of that. It's part of the UI. Even when you're here, there's a right-click menu. So just be aware of that so that you know that that's there. All right. And I think I've got that. Just going through my notes here. So showed you how to grab an image, grab that, we showed you that. We went through Windows, docking, toolbars, we went through the effects, talked about the controller tab, the layout tab, talked about the sequencer quickly, talked to you about the right-click menus. So that's what I was going to do there. So again, I just done the basics of the software now. I just want to cover quickly the preferences because that may impact how you use the software too. I'm not going to go through all the preferences, but I wanted to cover a few items here. So under File, Preferences, we have these choices. It's slightly different, by the way, in a Mac world. I believe it's under the xLights menu, and then there is a preference window there, but it's the same contents once you get to it. So I just want to cover off a few things that you'll get when you first install xLights. Normally, it'll come installed, it'll say backup on save. So what that's going to do is, actually, is it backup on save? No, it's backup on launch, I believe, if I recall. What that means is it's going to keep a copy of your layout and a copy of your sequences, just your sequences, not all the images and everything else, in a separate folder. So if you mess up, you can restore it back to that previous version. So that's built into the defaults of xLights. There is an option here on when to purge it. I'm not sure what the default is. It might be set to none or never. I'm sorry, never. But you feel free to leave it as is for now. I'm not going to go through a recommendation on that. Just be aware that there is this ability to purge old ones, but you certainly want to at least have backup on launch. So if you're a new person coming to xLights, going into preferences, make sure that one is set. Another thing that comes up quite a bit is in colors. And I only mention that because sometimes people are on dark mode and they don't like a certain color that's showing up because they can't see it. That they're often configurable. These last two are pretty key in showing up in dark mode or not dark mode. So if you find something that you can't see very well on your monitor, you might want to switch these two colors to see if that works for you. And there's also, if you just don't like the dark mode, on Windows, you can suppress the dark mode. So there's obviously lots of preferences here, but I'm just trying to show what is maybe important for the new users to look at. Another last item here on the preferences is your email address. You want to put in your email address there so that sample.com, whatever, so that whenever if there's a crash or if there's an issue with xLights, it'll get sent to the developers and they can reach out to you if you want them to, um, based on the email addresses there. So if you want to look at that. And the other thing that should be set for most new users automatically with a new install is these two items here, link save and link controller uploads. I won't get into the reasoning behind it, but ideally they're both set to these values. So if you're in new install of xLights, just pop into the other tab, make sure those two are set. It'll make life easier for you going forward, all right? So check the backups, check the colors if you need to, and check the other tab, those two items. The rest of that can be just taken as is. You don't need to worry about that. I just want to cover off those couple of items. And I think that's all I had planned for this intro. Is there anything else that I should cover, guys? I didn't want to get into doing the controllers because that's a different and layout or the sequencer, but that's basic use of xLights. When you're all said and done, I guess I should have covered this. If you make any changes, there's a save button. You always want to save it. And if you're making changes to your sequencer, there's a save button up here. These are all your buttons for sequencing. You have what you're going to have is like new sequence, obviously, open an existing one, saving it. I talked quickly about the rendering. That makes more sense when you're talking sequencing. These have to do with sequencing, so I'm not going to get into that. These are shortcuts to all of these windows as well. All right. Everything else is pretty much what you would expect in software in terms of menus popping up, left mouse click to select them. And yeah, I think that's what I wanted to cover for the intro. Is there anything else we should cover?
In the layout, when you were drawing your items, I saw dots and different colors on them.
Yeah,
Does
we'll
it
cover
matter?
that in the layout class.
But when I'm starting to play, I want them placed correctly for the first time.
Well, okay, if you're playing, I mean, we draw everything left to right, and we draw things from the bottom to the top. So if you're playing around, drawing stuff on your layout, left to right, bottom to top,
Are there
which means green on the bottom, blue on the top.
are there any
To,
devices they should get to help them, like certain mice or something?
certain mice. Do you have an
Like
answer?
a,
I just use a normal mouse.
Okay.
Just it would be beneficial to have a mouse with a scroll wheel.
Good
an
point. For those
Apple
folks that are
Magic
still using
Mouse
thing,
or
yeah.
something. Try to get yourself one with a scroll wheel.
That's
Magic
what I was
Mouse.
getting
People
at.
that have
Comes-
trackpads, this is not the
Yeah.
software for trackpads.
Not at all.
True.
As well, ensure that your scroll wheel is a clickable scroll wheel, so you have a scroll click specifically.
Yeah. So for example, here is clicking the scroll wheel left and right. I don't know how it translates to a Mac world though. Is it the same thing? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I have
it's the same. It's the same.
And
have a
Mac
standard
scroll
dock on
in,
the Mac
scroll
that's
out.
the same.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same. I mean, I use a Logitech Windows mice on all of my Macs. It's the same.
Yeah. And try if you're going to go buy a mouse, one recommendation is look at the description of it and see if it says high precision. You'll get better detail and it'll easier to adjust if you have a high precision mouse. Like I use the Logitech MX Masters series.
Yep.
They're very
Yeah.
nice for this.
Same here.
All right. So just to repeat there on the show folder, when you come in, create a show folder that is dedicated for xLights. So create a show folder. Don't go just dropping it on your C drive or your D drive or whatever. That will be in a world of pain. Anything else? That's all I got for this one, guys. We can
All right. If anybody has any questions, throw your hands up, raise them in chat. We'll get to them after the class here. And with that, I want to thank you, Darrell, for your class. Next Wednesday, it is on Intro to xLights and Building Your Layout. So thank you, Darrell, again. I'm going to stop recording now, and thank you all for coming.